in the US. Now, this is all happening within my sports management class at Bilgi University. We were mainly approaching, that's the class's name, by the way, sports management structures, which are slightly different on this side of the ocean than in the USA. The government is more involved, federations, clubs, and the likes, and we've been talking about them all. And your joining us today has given us a great opportunity of learning about these structures over on the other side of the ocean in probably one of the greatest sports countries there is, America. Also, my students on my class are also natural hosts of this panel, so maybe they don't need any invitation. But we open this with the courtesy of our chairman, Professor Tünaz. We open this to all the students of Bilgi University.
Not only Bilgi University, we have also other participants from different universities and also industry, I have to tell you.
Super. Yeah. And then also, very importantly, students of the University of Delaware. We are very happy to have you here as well. With the advantage of you guys also being able to share the valuable content. But maybe a little beyond that, you have the opportunity to meet with our students. Sports management's on students on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean. So maybe some networking can come out of this, some future friendships. I don't know. I think it's a great opportunity in that respect as well. Now, the University of Delaware students, you already know Dr. Robinson, but I would like to make a short introduction towards our side. Professor Matthew Robinson, highly acclaimed academic of sports management. He has a lot of publications in his field. He also has a strong international perspective. One of his publications was about the difference in like sports clubs, the way they are structured on the European side, and then what's happening in America. I think that's a great book among many others. Besides being a very capable person, active on the theoretical side, Professor Robinson is also an important person in the field. He does a lot of guidance. He's an advisor for clubs and leagues in America. And also, he's been part of a wide portfolio of international sports projects in different continents. That's actually how I got to meet him almost 20 years from today. He's been working in different continents in Europe. He's been working in Turkey with the project we met each other. He's had extensions beyond in Asia, also in Africa. And he's done all of this through important sports-related platforms, clubs, NGOs, national federations, international federations. I know of FIBA, by the way, and he's still working with FIBA. And also national Olympic committees as well as the IOC. So being able to bring theory together with field work is actually a great advantage for anybody. And we are really looking forward to the content he will share with us today, which will be backed up by this vast experience coming from the field. Last point, some years ago in the project we were working together, he wanted to visit the Turkish Olympic Committee. So we set an appointment with the Secretary General and we went and visited them. And the time came, so we stepped into the room of the Secretary General, Neşe Gündoğan. And just as I was preparing to make a formal introduction, I was going to say Professor Robinson from the University of Delaware and Neşe Gündoğan, Secretary General of the Turkish National Olympic Committee. Just as I had barely started, Neşe suddenly said, Matt, and Matt said, Neşe, and they embraced. And it turned out they were classmates during their PhDs at Temple University in Philadelphia. So that was a great coincidence. Anyway, I don't want to prolong this introduction. I want to leave the floor to Professor Robinson. We agreed with him that he would take charge and conduct this session similarly to what he would be doing back home at the University of Delaware with his own students, because this would give our students a great opportunity to witness that atmosphere. So, Matt, thank you very much again. And you have the floor.
Great. Amir, thank you so much. And this is Sayın arkadaşlar, my friends in Turkey and students. Amir, always so good to see you. And, you know, for my students, just to give you a little history, as Amir, Dr. Turan had mentioned, you know, we go back, almost 18 years, I believe now, that we connected. And I give so much credit to Dr. Turan for all the opportunities that I've had in doing things internationally. That the first real international project that I was involved with was actually a project with Dr. Turan and the Turkish Basketball Federation and in doing a program in developing coaches. So here, let me just share my screen here quick. So, you know, the great thing I always felt about with Dr. Turan was, you know, the idea that, and there's a picture, Amir, from our days back at the University of Delaware, ceremony down at the Bob Carpenter Center at our basketball game, and then the coaches that we hosted here at University of Delaware, and some of them have gone on to be very successful professional coaches. I see Erdem. I know Erdem. I guess is he still with Fenerbahce? I believe coaching him. And Yakim, I think, is still coaching. So, but the one thing, and this is what's great about today is, you know, going into my experience with Dr. Turan and the project with the Turkish Basketball Federation, that the most valuable lesson I learned from Dr. Turan is that there's not right and wrong, but there's just different. That I'm going to be talking about today, and for our Turkish students, you know, if you're not familiar with the American sport model, the sport structure, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying this is the way we do it. And I think for the students in my class, they've been in a class called International Sport. So very much like you, they have been learning about the sport structure from an international perspective. We've looked at, you know, the European-based club models. We you know, hopefully they understand, you know, the roles of national federations, international federations, and so forth. And I always tell our students is that, you know, we're the different one than the rest of the world. The way that we have our sport structured. And what I was going to do at a certain point, I want to go through some information with you. And then what I'd like to do is go into breakout rooms and have an opportunity, and I'll be very conscious, it may take a couple minutes, but have a nice mix of getting our American students from the university mixed in with our new Turkish friends. And really what I want that conversation to be is, you know, the sharing of the good, the strengths and the weaknesses of our different systems, you know, and how we do things. And like I said, so today, as I go through and talk about this, I'm not going to say it's right or wrong. I'm just saying, well, this is how we do it. And so that's really going to be the spirit of this. And the last thing I'll say, Dr. Turan made a very good statement. And I know for my students, you know, I say this, that, you know, sport is truly a global entity. To say that, you know, when I started my career, that I would have a very good friend in Istanbul, Turkey, and that I can't wait to go back and visit Istanbul. But, you know, that was such a foreign idea to me. But the sport world is a very small world. And even though the globe is very large, the sport community is a very tight community. And so it's not out of the realm of possibilities that one day, two individuals that met here today may be colleagues. And whether it be working with each other on a project, which was, you know, one with one national federation, the other with a national federation, or one with a club, that you see the continued growth of international sport. And think about this, Amir, I think at the point when I first came over, I believe Turkey only had maybe, I think at that point, one Turkish player in the NBA, and then Turkoglu and Okur had just joined the league, I guess, at that point. And so to see the number of Turkish players that have come and thrived in the NBA, and again, I'll say this too I'll talk about the NBA. The one thing I always tell my students, the NBA is not an American basketball league. It is the world's most competitive basketball league that just happens to have the majority of its teams playing within the continental United States. The games are beamed around the world. The playoffs started yesterday, into over 200 countries. The number of international players every year, continues to increase. You have potentially the MVP of the league being an international player this year. So the call the NBA domestic league is really only talking about geography. It's not really talking about the scope and the reach of it. And you can say the same thing, about the English Premier League, or we could have an argument over, what's the best European soccer league. But, the way that the borders have really come down in sport, and the free movement of players, the free movement of technology enabling us to, and again, I've seen, I can watch EuroLeague, the Champions League games here in the United States and see international soccer. And so it really is amazing where it's gone. And I always think about this, that, Dr. Turam and myself, we're at the latter part of our stages of our career, that it's really going to be exciting to see where sport is, 20 years from now. And with you in both classes, potentially being the leaders of that sport world. And again, like I look at these pictures that, on the screen in front of you, that's from Amir. I'm going to say it's probably about 2003, 2004, maybe somewhere in that area. And just to know how far basketball has come internationally is truly amazing in that sense. So again, always good to be with Amir. And I'll say this, Amir, all that I've done, there's a few people that I always credit, and it's yourself as one, and then always Sean Ford for introducing the two of us. And my memory is getting up at 4 a.m., I think, to call you for the initial phone call talking about the project. So that was my introduction to international sport. All right, so let's talk about the U.S. model. Now, for the U.S. students, this may be a refresher for you going through it, but for our Turkish students, if there's something that's not clear, when we put you into breakout rooms, I'd like to think our students may be able to clarify, maybe if you have a question on some of those things that we'll go through. But I'm going to start off with a slide. And again, my students may roll their eyes because they see it so often. But it's really interesting. I think that when you understand sport, it's always very important that you understand all the variables that go into it. Now, Dr. Turam had mentioned that, United States, that we're viewed as a leading sport nation. And that's great. But I always like to say that when we talk about it, there's variables outside of sport that have contributed to our success. And this diagram, where you look at it, really talks about there's three groupings of variables that ultimately impact a country's success in international sport. There's macro level variables, and those are those variables that impact every aspect of society. The United States happens to benefit greatly from population, its GDP and its economy. We benefit from climate, that we have all different types of climates in our countries, that we're able to have athletes. Because again, you don't see many, countries coming from countries from the Caribbean or sub-Saharan Africa being very strong in downhill skiing. And that probably has more to do with a macro variable like the climate than it has to do with, their ability to produce elite athletes. But sub-Saharan Africa, produces a lot of great elite, runners, distance runners. So we talk about these macro variables. They're outside of our control, but they can either contribute or actually inhibit some of our success. So again, United States benefits greatly from some of those. But then the other aspect of it is what we call these micro level variables. And it's the culture, it's the people. And there's some aspects of American culture that we really benefit from, that by nature, we're extremely competitive people. We're individualistic in that sense. We are, going back to a macro that the one thing is we are in a capitalistic country that's based upon business. And as I go through here, you'll see, which makes us very unique than the other countries, is our sports system is very much based on business. Dr. Turam had just mentioned that, the biggest difference I see between the United States and when we look at other countries is the involvement of government in that. So, for example, when I met Dr. Turam, he was very much involved with the Turkish Basketball Federation, and the professional league reported through that federation. Now, in the United States, we have, again, I mentioned the NBA. Now, on paper, the federation, which we call USA Basketball, is above the NBA, but in reality, it's not. The NBA is a multi-billion-dollar international entity that they recognize and they understand that on paper, they're supposed to be a part of our federation. But the USA Basketball doesn't certify our players, doesn't certify our coaches. They do not hand down suspensions or anything like that. They're not involved in that governance. And again, as we go through and start talking about pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses, that's a debate whether or not that's a good thing or bad thing, that we are very much business oriented in what we do. So again, that's a part of a macro, but also a part of a micro level aspect. Now, the meso level variables we'll talk about a little bit later on are those variables that we do control that contribute to our sport. Now, as I go through the different environments here and talk about them, there's things that I like to say I am somewhat critical of the U.S. model based upon the fact that it's very much profit driven. Now, to appreciate profit driven, to give you an idea, tomorrow I could say I'm going to start a soccer club or a basketball club here in Newark, Delaware. And I'll go out and I'll get, 10 parents who will sign their kids up and will each pay me $5,000 to train their kid, because I can tell them that I think I'm a great coach and I potentially make their player an NBA player. And so those parents would pay me money and I would have a club. And I have no certification in coaching basketball. There's no one said that I could do it. No one had to sanction me doing it. I just chose to do it. And so I always say that's a great thing that I can do that, but it's also a bad thing on that side of things. So when we look through all of our sports structure, you'll see that all of them, almost all of them, there's a profit motive associated with it. It's a business. Someone's trying to make money. Now, it's kind of interesting. We did a project with our U.S. women's soccer. Is very successful. We're usually ranked first and second in the world. And we did a study for our federation that was looking at what is it that we need to do in order to remain the top in women's soccer. And the thing that we identified was we did not have a professional league. Now, here's what was really interesting about that was we had tried to have 2 women's professional leagues so that players in their mid-20s could continue to train and play at a high level. And then they would feed into our national team, and then our national team would be successful. So if you look at most team sports in the Olympics, most of them have professional leagues. Those countries that are good have professional leagues that their players are continuing to play. Well, in the case of women's soccer, the women's professional leagues could not make it as a business. They tried twice and failed. The business model didn't work. They weren't able to make enough money to pay the players, cover their expenses, and so forth. So in that case, the federation stepped in and said, we're going to subsidize the league. And what they basically do now is they pay the salaries of the majority of the top players. And then they've worked a relationship with other federations that if a federation sends their player to play in the league, the federation's responsible for the salary of that player. So what they basically said was they made kind of a hybrid relationship so that this for-profit league could continue, but yet it was being subsidized because the federations recognized, the importance of that. So it was kind of interesting, Dr. Turam and I co-authored an article, and we really talked about that, with the United States model, it's really, you see, we've been influenced by the European model, but I think we've influenced the rest of the world that you're seeing more business-like entities coming up in other countries. I think, I don't know if Amir, you guys talked about in your class, what the European the league tried to do with soccer. But, you know, that was a clear challenge to the existing sports structure of the federations, the FIFA, the UEFA, and it was a for-profit venture. If you asked me, it was a great deal for those clubs that were going to get to do it, you know, from a financial sense. They were basically saying, hey, if we're making the money, we should keep the money. And that's very much the mindset of American sport. And so when I saw that, that was American sport creeping into European soccer, and it looked, well, obviously they're not ready for that yet. So that's a framework to be thinking about, that, you know, the U.S., yes, we have excellent sport, but I think we have a lot of lead-ins for that. And then the second thing is we're very much a profit-driven environment. Okay. So just to give you an idea of taking a look at the value of the sport industry in the United States, that it's rising up to about, by 2023, the predictions of it's about an $83 billion industry. Now, what I'm going to do is go through several slides and just show you, as I mentioned, that industry is everything from the NBA championship down to Dr. Robinson running a basketball team here in Newark, Delaware, and everything in between. And so what we always talk to our students about is, you know, I always say when we present the industry, you know, here's the industry, but here's also your career opportunities. And I think that's the one thing neat about the United States, that there are a lot of opportunities, you know, to get into sport in the business side of things. And I'll say this, the majority of the jobs in the American sport industry are related to revenue generation. So that if you hear the salaries of a LeBron James, you know, that money has to be made in order to pay LeBron James that money, or to Steph Curry. Yesterday, we had a huge golf tournament, and the winner of that golf tournament, the winner got $2.1 million, and the loser got 1.2, not the loser, the two second place guys each got $1.3 million. That's not a bad, I'm not going to call a guy a loser, just made $1.3 million for playing golf for 4 days. But where did that money come from to pay those golfers? And so when you talk about the sport industry, you know, on an NBA franchise, there's only 12 guys, and gosh, the NBA staffs now are, you know, 10 people maybe coaching on the coaching staff. But then the Philadelphia 76ers have almost 40 individuals selling tickets to the arenas. So, and then when they're in the arenas, you got, you know, again, it's an entertainment experience. It's not just a basketball game. You know, it's an entertainment. If you ever watch the NBA games, just looking at the introductions and the, you know, all the stuff that they do in advance to make this, you know, this incredible experience for the fans. So really, when you talk about that $83 billion, it's a large industry. And then it becomes a question, well, what aspect of the industry are you interested in being involved in? And then to take a look at its structure. Now, there's several different models that are proposed to try to explain the sport industry in the US. And I thought I'd go with a real simplistic one just to, you know, give an overview. There's some that get more complex in the competence and so forth. But basically, you can break it down as that there's a performance sector, there's a production sector, and then there's a promotion sector. Now, we spend a good portion of our time, and a lot of our, probably a lot of even your focus and your understanding of the U.S. model is in that performance area when we talk about our professional sport leagues and so forth. But it's a lot more than that. So this picture here is it almost encompasses everything about the sport industry. But if you're familiar with college basketball in the United States, you know, every March we have a thing called March Madness. And it's really interesting about March Madness. It's an American college basketball tournament. It runs 3 weeks, and it funds through the television contract. It funds the almost 90% of an organization called the NCAA. So that what you're seeing is a basketball game being played inside an American football stadium. So I believe in this case, there was about 75,000 people inside a building to watch a basketball game. And then that doesn't count the millions that are at home watching it on TV. And so this is more than a basketball game. And as I go through the different industry sectors, the guys on the court are only one small part of this entire sport industry, you know, as far as the full scope of it. So when you take a look at this performance sector of the industry, and I just decided to go with logos that some of you may be familiar with, others you may not. But at the grand, at the high end of the spectrum, when we talk about performance, you have an entity, a global entity like the NBA. The NBA is not a domestic basketball league in the United States. Now, there's some people that have been critical of the NBA, and I know Amir, in times in doing things with FIBA, that some, is the NBA encroaching on domestic leagues and so forth. But the NBA has made a conscious choice to be a global brand in the way that it's brought in international players. It's broadcast its games internationally. It's opened up its website that I believe now more merchandise is purchased off NBA.com internationally than domestically. And it's all being driven by this, 48-minute basketball game, that's on, 5 nights a week or getting played with that, within the United States, during the season. Now, in the NBA, you have the individual franchises. And here's what I think is really interesting about, our structure of sport, that the individual franchises, I can't just call up the NBA and say, I want to have a team in the NBA. You have to be approved. They have a limit on the number of teams that are allowed to be in those leagues. And again, this is not the federation. This is this entity that is the NBA. Now, another area that's a huge area is what we call the college athletics. And down below, if you can see the NCAA, the letters down there, that's a large governance entity that oversees, a multi-billion-dollar high competitive athletic environment. We're unique. Here's where we're unique again, that we're one of the only few countries in the world that has competitive athletics embedded within education. I think it's really interesting. Amir, I always struggle with the pronunciation of the school. The boys' school that has the TBA, the Turkish basketball league team.
Darüşşafaka.
Yeah, Darüşşafaka. That was interesting. They're still a team, but they were a school, but they used the team to brand the school. And so, but those in the United States, our college basketball players are supposed to be going to school. They're supposed to be getting an education. And right now here, it was very interesting. That's our best players now are being encouraged not to go that route, but rather to go straight away and play professional basketball. I think Dr. Turam's experience, if he shared that, of playing college basketball in the United States, but then returning home, and playing professionally. Right now, when Dr. Turam was playing college basketball, he was not supposed to be paid. He was given education, but yet was asked to play competitive basketball for his school. And so you're seeing that in basketball, it's declining, that our top players are choosing not to go to college basketball, and some are going directly to the NBA or to into the professional ranks. So a very popular school is North Carolina that has produced many great players. As a matter of fact, our Turkish coaches who came over to the United States had the chance to meet the iconic coach Dean Smith, and then also Roy Williams, who just retired during that trip, which was a really neat experience. But then we also have high school sports. And we have this great high school down in Baltimore that's produced a number of NBA players. So again, these are all performance environments that you see, that where these athletes get the chance to play, and again, it's profit mode type of environment. Now, the next pick, I don't know if we've got a lot of basketball fans here, but if you're familiar with Stephen Curry, that now when we start talking about the environments that created a Stephen Curry, that again, there in the United States, we have a structure set up that enables, what's that? Maybe Stefan's there, maybe 2 or 3 years old, 4 years old, to be a 4-year-old to becoming a multimillionaire, in the NBA, and, Hall of Fame player, one of the best players in the world. And what's that look like? And now, again, I think what it looks like in the United States is a little bit different than what it looks like in terms of the player development and what it looks like as far as an athlete and their experience going through Turkey. So this is where we talk about what we call the production environment of sport in the United States. Now here at the top row are some of these are global brands. I think Amir, maybe you should fail any student who doesn't know the brand logo in the left-hand corner there, that Nike swoosh, is boy, if you don't know that, I don't know if you should be working in sport.
We know it.
what an iconic brand. I mean, a running shoe company that started in Portland, Oregon is now, known throughout the world. But two other brands, Under Armour's a brand that's challenged Nike, and then Spalding is the maker of our ball. So we have an entire industry that's producing the equipment, the uniforms, the sneakers that is needed by those who perform, and that ranging from your elite world-class players, down to the weekend warrior. I mean, I always find it interesting to realize that the majority of basketball shoes and athletic footwear that are sold aren't even used for athletic competition. I believe 60% of them are, we wear them I wear sneakers now. My knees are bad. So I wear, a pair of running sneaks now more than ever because my knees are so bad. And I mean, I'm not going to plan to go running 5 miles. I'm just going to wear a pair of sneakers. But where did I get the idea to buy those sneakers? Maybe because I saw an NBA player wearing them, during a game. And so again, this idea of the equipment. But then the second tier are the environments where the athletes get to be developed, they get to grow, they get the opportunity to play their games. Now, on the far end is our Olympic model. Now, here's something really interesting, and going back to a point that Dr. Turan brought up. In most countries, the Olympics, and also I've been there, USA Swimming, which is one of our strongest national federations. And we have great success in the sport of swimming. But both our United States Olympic Committee and USA Swimming, they are self-sufficient financially. They get no subsidies from our government. So we run this international coaching program, and I always talk about this on the first day of just saying, understand that our Olympic committee is very different, that we have to go out and generate money to pay for our Olympics. Now, how do we make that money? One, we get portions of the IOC TV contract because our NBC is, broadcast, it pays the most to televest Olympic Games. But then they have to sell corporate sponsorship. They have special events. They have memberships, all these areas to generate the revenue to fund our Olympic sports. And it's the same thing with USA Swimming. Now, the thing about it, though, is what's very different in our model is, and, I say jokingly with my students often that, we have an Olympic Games about to happen, in Tokyo this year. In the United States, if I wanted to, make the U.S. Olympic swim team, I would swim here in Newark, Delaware, and then I would go to an Olympic trials I think it's in June, July. And if I was finished first or second in a race, I then become a part of the U.S. Olympic team, and I'll go to Tokyo and represent our country. Now, it's very different, and I'm not sure as much as how much of it's independent, how much of the Olympic Committee is supporting it. In a number of countries, it is, no, we identify an athlete, we think that could be a medal, we're going to fund them, we're going to train them. We know 2 years out that they're the athlete that's going to be going and representing us in the Olympic Games. And we'll put money behind them. In the United States, I train on my own. And then occasionally maybe I'll get called in for a town identification camp or something along those lines. Maybe they'll give me a small scholarship to help cover some of my living expenses. But it's really put on me. And so the last one on the right-hand side, when I talk about tightest strength and fitness, there's people out there who have businesses training elite athletes down to somebody who wants to lose 20 pounds because they ate too much over the summer or ate too much on weekends, whatever it might be. And it's a business. And again, there's people that are very profitable. And then at the bottom two down there, now this is the one that we have, it's called the YMCA, it's Young Men Christians Association, but they offer sport opportunities. And the organization is completely evolved it now. Every YMCA has a fitness center. They have youth programs for children. It's not profit, but parents still pay for those things. And then the last one it's a very sad story, but I was actually in the process of working with a club out in California that had just signed a deal with Kobe Bryant, and they were changing their name to the Mamba Sports Academy. And Kobe's daughter trained there, and Kobe was coming in as a partner and owner, and they just had rebranded everything. And I loved what they were doing in their development of athletes. And again, it was a for-profit business, and they were about developing athletes the right way. And I had a trip scheduled to go out to California, and it was going to be shortly after. And then, one of the great tragedies, in sport is, with Kobe Bryant, dying in his accident. They're still moving forward with the academy, but Kobe had planned on being very engaged. And Kobe had in his mind that there's a right way you develop an athlete, and he was going to put it into a business practice. And Kobe was planning on running a business and being involved with this organization to develop athletes the right way. And again, it wasn't the government. It was Kobe was going to be a businessman in running that business. And then the last one is we have arenas. In the previous slide, I showed this arena here, that we have arenas all over our country. All of them are either for-profit or are they, and I say Madison Square Garden is an iconic arena in the United States. The New York Knicks play there. Every NBA player wants to play there. But we have arenas all over the country. We have facilities all over the country. And again, some of them are government supported and they're mostly through schools. But otherwise, I take money, I invest, I get a piece of land, I put an arena up. I hopefully can get an NBA and NHL franchise in there. I hold concerts in there. And it's I'm producing and creating opportunities for people to play and then also to people to watch, in that sense. Now, I thought it was great when I was there in 2010. So Amir, Dr. Tron, the arena that was open for the World Championships, was that the Volkswagen Arena or was that?
No, that's the Sinan Erdem Arena in Ataköy.
Okay. And beautiful modern arena. And again, that's an arena. It's not a basketball court. That's used for multiple types of events that can be held in that arena. And so that's the next aspect of the industry that we look at it. And now the last one is, and as I mentioned, most of the jobs in professional sport are involved with this idea of revenue generation. And there's a lot of opportunities in our sports structure. There's so many careers out there that you're not working for an NBA team, but you're working with some entity that is involved with an NBA team in some way, shape, or form. So I just put this picture up here. How many people are familiar with the Staples Center? Have heard of the Staples Center? And I know I can't see all hands and things with the screen right now, but the Staples Center, as you can see on the left-hand side, the Lakers play there, the Clippers play there, the Sparks play there. The Los Angeles Kings are an ice hockey team. But Staples is do you have Staples in Turkey, Amir? The franchises?
We did. I don't know if we still have it, but we had them. The pens and papers and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And basically, Staples put their name in that arena. So anytime the Lakers, Clippers, or the Sparks, whoever play there, you have to say that it's in the Staples Center. But it's funny, the name is on the top of the building. And the reason it's on top of the building is when you fly into Los Angeles, I'm not sure what direction it is, but when you fly into Los Angeles, you fly over the building. And I don't know about you guys, whenever I'm flying, you always start looking out the window, see, what can I see down there? Well, you see the Staples Center. And then also Staples Center is right by a major thoroughfare in Los Angeles. So cars are driving past it. So they see the Staples Center. And so basically Staples is looking to generate awareness for its brand by being associated with sport. And so we have this whole other segment of the sport industry we call the promotion industry. And so for us, we have ESPN, which is, broadcast sports throughout the year. And with that, there's people who have jobs for ESPN. And one of the jobs in there, as I mentioned before, there's people who sell the advertising for ESPN to make the money so that they can pay for the rights to show those games. You have a company down the bottom. It's called Octagon. Octagon's a sport marketing company that puts on events that they get hired to put on, for example, a golf tournament or a tennis tournament. They're specialists in running the event, but then also they're specialists in working with, over in the right-hand corner, you see Coca-Cola. Again, Nike and Coca-Cola are probably the two brands everybody knows, right? But Octagon gets hired to come in and activate sponsorship. So that if Coca-Cola signs a sponsorship deal with, let's say, the NBA, so Octagon's the one that's going to say, hey, we want to make sure all the Coke signs are in the right places in the arena. We want it to be the case that a part of the Coca-Cola sponsorship deal with an NBA team is they have a luxury box, at the game, and that at every game, the people in that luxury box get to go down on the court and meet the head coach of the team and the best player. Well, my job is to make sure every game Coca-Cola has somebody in that box and that they're the right people in that box, meaning that they're people that we want to do business with. And then we're going to ensure that Coca-Cola gets a return on that investment with that, because Coca-Cola isn't giving money just for the sake of it. Coca-Cola hopes to make money, but then also the teams are looking to make money off those sponsorships. Now, I just threw up in the middle that I run this high school basketball tournament each winter. And it's in a local area that nobody goes to in the wintertime. So we do it down there to bring people there. But then if you list there, it's called Slam Dunk to the Beach. But below there are all our sponsors. That is 60% to 65% of our revenue is through sponsorship. So if we don't sell sponsorship, we can't have the tournament. And matter of fact, one year we had a bad year, and the guy that was supposed to sell sponsorship didn't do a good job, and we were in trouble. And we operated at a deficit, and we basically borrowed money the next year to cover our deficit, and then we had to double what we sold in sponsorship. So the government wasn't supporting us. The only thing we got from the local government was a couple $1,000s to say, hey, thanks for doing this. Now, we do have these entities, and there's a city called Houston. And I'll make a prediction for you guys. The next U.S. city, if they ever host an Olympic Games, will be Houston, Texas, because they're all in on hosting major international sports events. They'll be one of the World Cup hosts for the FIFA World Cup. They'll be one of the cities. And their next goal is to host an Olympic Games. So they'll be that's my prediction. If the U.S. hosts another Summer Olympic Games, Houston will be the city, because there's an entity there that works with the government, works with business, works with sport to bring sport in. Why? Because when sport comes, people spend money. They stay in hotels. They eat in restaurants. They shop. When Istanbul hosted, or Turkey hosted, the 2010 World Championship for basketball, there were visitors that came to Istanbul that otherwise wouldn't be there. And that stimulated the economy. People, were made aware of the history, the beauty, the traditions of Turkey and everything that's in Istanbul. So that was a part of hosting a world championship like that. Okay, so those are the segments we talk about. Now, the last thing I'm going to share, and then I'm going to break you guys in your breakout rooms, is that this idea that this is a model that I use often when I try to explain sport, but these are the variables that are associated with elite sport. And it starts with financial support. At the bottom, you see at the bottom, it says that they're called inputs. There's money, you need financial support, you need an organizational structure like a national governing body, national federation, or just a good business model, and then foundation and participation. You need the right athletes. And then what you do with them. When we look at above there, so I've got money, I've got a structure, and I've got athletes. Now I got to identify them and develop them. I got to support them and give them funds. I got to have the right facilities. I got to have coaches that are qualified, but also compensating them so they can be professional. I want them to have international experiences. And then I want to incorporate sports science into making them better athletes, and train them better, And so when you look at those areas that says throughput in the middle, every one of those in other countries are often controlled by a federation or by an Olympic committee, a sport ministry. In the United States, almost all of those are primarily profit-driven opportunities. And so again, going back to it, it's a business model. It's a business model that's run, okay? And then our outputs, we always talk about it. As Dr. Trump said at the beginning, we have success in international sport, but we have success in some sports, but not others. So the fact that our government, and we don't have a federally, regulated system, there are some weaknesses. So for example, as good as we are in basketball and swimming, we're not so good in, let's say, Taekwondo or judo or weightlifting. Why? Because our best athletes gravitate towards sports where they can make money. And then the majority of our interest is there. So if we took some of our NFL players, our professional American football players, and put them into sports like the shot put in track and field or into weightlifting, we could be better, but we don't. And so other countries have their best athletes going into certain sports. So if we had a centralized policy, we would say, yes, I know, Ben Bavforth, I know you want to be a runner. Ben's one of my students I know who runs, but sorry, Ben, you're not going to be a runner. We're going to make you a volleyball player, because we did predictive testing to say that, you had the attributes to be an elite volleyball player. But in the United States, heck, I did it. I pursued a basketball career. And I'm 6 feet tall. If you equate feet to the meters and everything, my chances of being an NBA player were pretty much slim and none. But I wanted to because, hey, I wanted to play in the NBA. But if somebody would have said, you know what, you should have put your energies into swimming or tennis, maybe I would have done differently. But that's not our model. And again, you take a look at certain countries, they are very directed of the federations doing talent identification and encouraging, in some cases, channeling athletes into certain sports. So what I want to do now, as I said, the breakouts, instead of me taking questions, I thought I'd break you guys into some breakout rooms. We got 59 people, and then have you guys kind of talk a little bit. And you guys, and for my Turkish friends, I know I talk fast. I'm from a place called Philadelphia, and as Amir, I'm a fast talker. Yeah. So for my Turkish friends, if you need some clarification from our U.S. students, but I think for my U.S. students, the American model, maybe be open-minded in asking what it's like in Turkey, because we haven't been in Dr. Turan's class. And we didn't specifically talk about Turkish sport. We talked about, I think, sport generally internationally. So I'd like to have maybe about a good 10-minute conversation, if you guys can, just sharing with one another in your groups, okay?
Could I suggest something real quick, Matt?
Yeah, go ahead, Amir.
For both sides, both groups of students. Now, listening to Matt, it's great. And I was thinking about the differences, how we create our sports management structures class at Bilgi and at the University of Delaware. And I was taking some notes here. And listening to Matt, the emphasis of his talk was on business, profit-oriented entities as major players in the sports scene, and then other players related to production companies, shoes, balls, but again, profit-oriented. So one of the terms that came up a lot was money. Another one was funding. Another one was revenues and profits. It's the reflection of a free market model with minimal regulations. On the other hand, our sports management class, we are at the end of the term now, so for weeks, our main emphasis has not been on money, funding, profits, but on something quite different, on structure. And with related to structure, rules, regulations, laws, because on this side of the ocean, everything is more structured. The example Dr. Robinson gave about the try for the new free market football league in Europe, soccer, in April. What happened? It bumped against the wall of structure and bounced back, and it's dead. Why? Because the structure was too strong. So please, in these groups now, when you are talking freely with each other, the UDEL students and the Bilgi students, think about this main diversion. This is a big difference. One side is free market, thinking about profits, funding, money. On the other side, the main emphasis is built upon structure, rules, and regulations.
Amir, real quick, I shared with the group our article. We talked about the Westphalian-based sports system, which is very much, as you said, the structure, the federations based on the city-state and everything like that. And I shared that story with them back when I think I was over the one summer, when I think Turkoglu and Okur came back, and the federation wanted them to go into camp, and they wanted to say, "No, we're not going to go to camp. I'll show up for the tournament." And that was an NBA mindset that I have a contract coming up, I have a long season. And it was this, just like you had said, a very much a profit-driven type of mindset of me being a professional, and then the pushback against the structure of the federation system. So that's a great example. And I think you see that more happening, of the back and forth with that. And I think also, again, this idea with the NBA of, people saying, don't play in the Olympics or don't play in a world championship, save yourself for the season. And again, there's that conflict, that conflict in play between, like you said, the profit versus the system. And again, there's two sides to that argument on there. So I'll tell you what, guys, I like to think I did a pretty good job of mixing things up here. That's been going through and trying to have a nice mix of with our groups. So I'm gonna open it up, guys, and introduce yourself, and hopefully you guys can have some good conversations and bring some stuff back to us. Okay, here we go.